Hey, welcome. If you're watching this, you probably want to know what is Mercurial, what's it good for, and how can it help me? So, most people are familiar with Subversion or CVS, the more traditional version control systems that operate using a server that hosts the repository and the laptop as a client to that, where you check out the change or check out the source code, then you make some changes and you commit it right back to the server. I mean, you get a lot of benefits from doing this. You can always go back to a previous version, tag versions, branch off, and there's merging, although merging is not always very nice on these systems. You can also have an entire team use the same repository, and they all check out the code and can check in their changes. And this is good and bad because people can also check in changes that don't work, but they have to check it back into the server, otherwise it won't get traced. Yeah, they won't be able to revert back. So you run into the dilemma of, do you check in something that's not quite working as a way to version it, or do you just work until you have your entire feature done and then check that into the server? Well, Mercurial works a little differently. On Mercurial, you actually have the repository on your machine. So it's actually a full repository on your laptop, and you're able to make your changes and commit them, and all of that happens locally. So why don't we take a look at how quick and easy it is to set up a new repository and make a few changes to it. Once you have Mercurial installed on your system, you can access it through the command line or through one of the many GUI tools that are out there. I prefer the command line. It's more universal and it doesn't have really anything to get in your way. Simple command to create the repository, hg init, and then the name. We'll do merc sample. And we'll just change into that directory. Mute the speaker a little. And so once we're in here, we look around and there's nothing. We don't have any files yet. This is just an empty repository. Luckily, I have some source files sitting here on my desktop. I'll go ahead and move them over. So now we have added some files. Let's see what the status of our repository is. There, Mercurial sees the files, but it doesn't know them. These are stranger files, and they have the question mark next to them. To get them into the repository, we just use the hgadd command, and since we want to add absolutely everything in this folder, we'll use star. Now they show up with an A next to them for added. They aren't in the repository yet. They're just marked to be added on the next commit. So we'll go ahead and do that. We'll do commit, and you always want to give a message or a description for your commit. This allows you to actually know what you did when you look back on it 2 months from now. And the more discreet you can make the commits and describe them, the easier time you have if you ever have to go back through your history and find some specific change that you made. So we'll just say added some files. Now that they're added, there's nothing to see in the status. So we have our repository set up. We have some files in it. Let's make some changes. So I am the first file, and we'll just add some nonsense onto that. Save it. Now we can see that the file was modified when we look at the status. So we like the changes, they're all good. Let's commit that. And just like that, we have a new version. We can always look at the versions of our repository by running hglog. This also works for a specific file. And we can see the two changes that we've made so far, the two versions we've created, where we added some files and then we changed the text of file 1. It records the user, the date, all the files that were actually changed, and the description that you entered. So let's say we made a mistake. We really didn't want to add all that nonsense to the beginning of the file. If we haven't made any other commits, HD rollback will take away the last commit. And when we look at the log, we can see it's gone. But if we run a status, we see that it's still modified. So rollback does not revert. It just takes that latest commit out of the repository. If we really want to get this file back to how it was beforehand, we would want to run hg revert. You run that, you can see it says that it reverted it, but it also saved the modified version that we had, and both of them appear in this directory. There's a flag you can set so that it doesn't do that if you really don't care to save that. We'll just go ahead and remove it. And let's double check the file and make sure that we actually reverted to what we originally had. Yep, looks like what we had. So that's how Mercurial can be used by a single user to use to track your versioning and manage your source code. So now this picture should make a little bit more sense. We've gone through as a single user and created a single repository. Mercurial can maintain more than one repository. You can create several repositories, and these can be for the same project or different projects. You can init a new repository, or you can clone an existing repository. So let's take a look at that. Why would we want to make a clone? Making a clone allows you to develop new features independently and concurrently on several different clones, and then pull them in to the main repository. This way you can get things the way you like it while maintaining a releasable version of your product at all times in a different repository. So if you had your Merc sample repository linked up to a build plan that was actually there to produce your production code, you could leave that alone, develop your features somewhere else, track all your changes, do all your commits, and then when you're happy with the feature, you can pull it into Merc sample, take care of any merges, and not affect your build with some prototype code. In our example, we're going to pretend that we have a bug and we want to make a separate clone to take care of that bug and then merge it back in later. So to actually do the clone, we use the hd clone command, tell it what we want to clone, and tell it the name of the new repository. So we'll clone to bug fix. When we look in bug fix, we can see we have all of our source code files here. So let's make a change to fix our bug. And we'll just say, I never liked Jack anyway. Save that. Commit our change here. So now we're happy, we fixed our bug, we want to get this back into our main repository. So we can switch over to Merc sample, and in here we don't have any changes, we're all up to date. Let's bring in that bug fix. If we want to know exactly what we would be bringing in, we can use hg incoming, tell it where we want to know where we want to check for incoming changes, and it will compare the two repositories and And so it says, we've changed some file 3. Our change was that Jack sucks. We like this, so we'll go ahead and pull that over. Using the hg pull command, tell it where you want to pull from. Went ahead and pulled that over, and you can see it's suggesting that we run hg update to get a working copy. So we're running hg update. We've already merged that change in. Update and merge are different. Update is a simple case. That's the case where we didn't make any changes to file 3, so we can just add them in. Had we made some changes and some conflicts had been detected, we would have had to use the merge command, where it will automatically try and merge the 2 files. If that fails, then you actually have to try and resolve it, and worst case, you'll actually have to go in manually and change the files yourself to get exactly what you want. Luckily, that happens much, much less in Mercurial than it does in things like Subversion. Well, let's actually see if our change got in here. There it is. I never liked Jack anyway. Well, if you have friends, you can actually use peer cloning. This will allow your friends to grab your repository and make a clone of it. You use the hgserve command from your repository, and it will have a process run that your friends can connect to, and it supplies you with the address on your local network that they can connect to, and then they just have to clone it. You aren't able to push changes back, so it's a one-way, but it's pretty helpful if you want to share some specific feature that you're working on or the bug fix to people without having to resort to tarballing up your code and emailing it to them or putting it on a USB drive and handing it to them. Although you actually can put your repository on a USB drive and hand it to someone, and they can work with it just like they brought it down. What's even more useful is setting up a shared server. And you can set up a shared server on several free sites, or there's tools that you can do this locally. But while initially it looks like a traditional client-server version control system, it's still different. Since we're using Mercurial, each one of the devices can do their commits without affecting the others. So you can actually version control what you're working on completely. And then when you have something that you want to share with everyone else that's working, you can push it back to the server. And then other people can check out your changes using incoming. And if they agree with what you did, they can pull it down into what they're doing. Or they can finish up their code before they pull in your changes. So it allows you to have that flexibility to decide when you're going to get other people's changes while still allowing you to take care of your code. And that's a huge benefit from having everything you commit be shared across your entire team. And that's it for this brief introduction to Mercurial and the first video on the Blue Zombie blog. I hope you enjoyed it, and you can send any feedback you have to john@bluezombie.net. Thanks for watching.